About a year ago, I took this film class for a semester in college. Now I'm studying engineering, so it was an elective. I think it was between filmmaking, bakery, and bead making or something, and they're all pretty hardcore in their own sense, but yeah, I knew I wouldn't pick anything else. I had pretty low expectations for the class going in, and unfortunately I was let down pretty hard. The class felt less about studying and making films and more about the parts of a camera, which felt like an awful waste of time. I mean, if you're gonna inspire the next generation of filmmakers, you're not gonna do it by telling them that the red button is for recording. However, my most severe letdown happened during our first editing class. The class started off with the definition of editing. I knew that the way the lecturer defined it in the next few seconds would be a deciding moment on whether or not the class was in good hands. He said, "Editing is simply the process of cutting out the pointless parts of a film. Period." And he moved on to the next thing. Now, keep in mind that he seemed to have only dealt with, wedding films and events or whatever, but still, I was so disappointed. It felt as though he had truncated this whole beautiful, expressive, creative world of editing into an industrial and frankly boring process. In my experience, editing has been this nuanced, expansive experience that has opened up a million ways to tell a story, through feeling, not formula. Nothing like he had described. His statement has been lingering in my mind for so long, and I've been itching to discuss editing with the respect and passion it deserves. There's a saying that a film is made 3 times. First on the page, then on the set, and finally in the edit. As a society, we value writing and filming a lot more, and they're held at a higher standard. I would imagine the response you would get at a dinner table from telling people you edit films would be different from telling them you write films. People ask less interesting questions about film editing. It's always, what program did you edit with? How long did it take? How'd you make that transition? It's never, what did you feel here that inspired this decision? Why'd you let the scene linger on for so long? Why'd you pick this song or this color? And that's my main gripe around the common concept of editing. Editing is way more than you could ever learn from a YouTube tutorial or a classroom. It's more than the program you use or the amount of effects you have on at once. Editing is a spiritual and emotional journey of storytelling that requires empathy and patience, and for you to become a good listener. The film historian Kevin Brownlow called film editing the hidden art, saying, editors are passed over by film historians because their work, when successful, is virtually unnoticeable. That's quite ironic. A successful edit is often invisible and flows in perfect synergy with the writer's and director's work, therefore being hard to acknowledge as a separate entity. In no way am I trying to discount the importance of all the technical aspects of editing, like cutting, color grading, and such. They are crucial in their own sense, and I'll link a bunch of channels that have great editing tutorials. After all, you can't ever tell a good story without the editing skills to transform your ideas into reality. But the most interesting part of editing goes on in the editor's mind, not the computer. Every technical decision, like a cut or a color grade, must be informed by the editor's instinct and serve some purpose for the story. Every time the scene lingers on for a few seconds longer, every time the music swells in volume, every time it's dead silent, there is something more going on behind every decision. Take for example how Joe Walker, the editor of Dune, built an entire world with his sound design and color. How Mike Mills made a film feel tender and warm with an aspect ratio, music, and voiceovers, and come on. How Jennifer Lame, the editor of Marriage Story, completely invests us in Charlie and Nicole's relationship in the first 8 minutes of the film through a montage, and then shatters our expectations with a single, perfectly placed cut. Editors have power over three things: sight, sound, and time. Sight deals with what an editor allows us to see, what they show us and what they hide from us. Sound is probably the most important world-building tool there is. The sound of New York City, of lightsabers, of voices can tell us so much about a place. And time. One of the most vivid examples of this was the infamous 4-minute scene of Rooney Mara eating a pie in A Ghost Story. Yes, 4 minutes. There is no blaring score or special camera movements, it's just a lady eating a pie. Now, following that awful definition of editing, one might want to cut the scene down to a 10-20 second scene at most and maybe just play it off as a comedic scene. I mean, she's literally just eating a pie, right? Well, no. The editor knew what he was doing. He thought it was important to be with her at that moment and to feel time as she felt it. Like molasses. What informed that decision was the context of the scene. She wasn't just eating a pie, she was dealing with the grief of her dead husband. Watching the scene in the context of the film is an extremely uncomfortable experience. Nothing much changed in those 4 minutes, but that was never the point. The director, David Lowery, said this about the scene. Hopefully, 2 minutes into it, when people realize it's still going on, the anticipation just evaporates and you just exist in that scene the way it was intended to function. And that says a lot about editing and about how important intention is. Here I'd like to make an important point, that editors shouldn't cut based solely on what seems to progress the story, but according to the intent of the scene and according to emotion and character building. What is the scene trying to tell the audience? What is the character feeling? In another context, a 4-minute pie-eating scene would be a lot more absurd and obnoxious, and cutting it out entirely would be a pretty great choice, but here, the editor was able to tap into that mind space of the character and found out how to lead us to that same painful, heartbreaking place as well. Without the editor's instinct and empathy and understanding of a story and a character, films would only ever reach 2/3 of their potential, and that's a heartbreaking thought. No one would want to spend years perfecting a script, months filming beautiful scenes, and just for everything to fall apart in a disconnected and bland edit. And despite that, there is no wrong way to edit a sequence, but every variation will tell a different story. How about we redefine editing real quick? How about editing is an art form that involves the application of empathy and understanding to enhance the storytelling of a film through the manipulation of sight, sound, and time. I think that's done the art form a bit more justice. To make an effective edit, you have to spend a lot of time watching the clips you have and listening to the intrinsic voice that every video possesses. What I mean by intrinsic voice is the personality that a clip naturally has. Maybe you wrote a comedic scene and later on in the edit you listen to the intrinsic voice and realize, hey, this is a really awkward scene actually. Your job then, as an editor, is to use the technical skills you possess to harness the intrinsic voice and tap into that energy. Tap into that unintended awkwardness or romance or rage and allow the actors' performances to speak to you and the audience in ways you'd never expected. All artists should take on the responsibility of speaking about their process with the respect and love for the art that it deserves. It goes a long way for inspiring people, and it leads to more personal and truthful art. The next time you sit down to edit a film, YouTube video, or a meme, realize how powerful it is. Realize how much room for creativity, personality, and instinct there is. Immerse yourself in the stories you want to tell. Master your control of sight, sound, and time, and cut according to feeling, not formula.
That's it.
Thank you guys for watching and for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, thanks. Love you guys.
I love you.
See you next time.